Yeah, nerd being the operative word there, isn't it? That was a thrill ride.
Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Neil Almond.
Good to be back.
And Adam Smith.
Hello.
And Adam, you're going to be the focus of this episode. It's almost like the second part of our religious education talk. But first, Neil, what you reading for?
Hey, what you reading for?
So I've been quite fortunate that I've managed to get my hands on a copy of The Science of Reading, a handbook, the second edition, which came out, and it's a 605-page epitome of just the latest research. You can imagine the conversations that Chris Such and I are having behind the scenes all about this, and I've been taking it chapter by chapter. You don't have to read it in any kind of particular order whatsoever, but I've gone for recently a chapter called Models of Word Reading, What Have We Learned? And that's by Mark Seidenberg, Molly Farry-Thorne, and Jason D. Zevin, which is probably the coolest research name out there, I think. And this chapter just looks at the evidence behind what is known as the dual route cascade theory of reading versus Seidenberg's own connectionist model of reading, which people might know as the triangle model, where we look at the orthography, semantics, and phonology routes, and that how people kind of translate writing into sounds, which they then perceive and understand. It's real kind of Seidenberg heavy. If you've read his book, there's kind of nothing new here, but it's kind of quite interesting to know how he went about creating this model and why he thinks it's superior to the dual route model. So plenty to nerd out about for those that are particularly interested in it, which isn't many people. Adam, what are you reading for?
Yeah, nerd being the operative word there, isn't it? That was a thrill ride. So I am reading How the Other Half Learns by Robert Pondischio, which is a book that I think John Hutchinson recommended it, so I put it onto my Kindle and started reading it on the way to work. And it's about success academies in New York, which is a kind of chain of charter schools. And it's about their battle. I mean, it really has been a fight in New York between the public school system and this charter school system, and about the kind of culture in those schools. They're all, I mean, primarily, they were all increasingly, as they expand, they're less so, but they were all in the most deprived, least well-performing public school areas in your Harlems and your Bronx and Queens and things like that. And it's all about raising expectations, raising aspirations. What's really interesting is there's this character, Eva Moskowitz, who is the head of Success Academies, and she's kind of a bit of a, is it fair to call her an American Catherine Burblesing? She's not quite so invested in the culture wars, as far as I know. She's more about fighting for this charter school system, but she just goes out and gets what she wants. She just puts it out there. She's very candid in what she says, in her management style. It's really interesting. I mean, schools themselves, pedagogically, I probably don't really agree with some of what they do, the ways they teach reading and the way that they teach maths, for example, and the fact that they do like project-based learning and stuff like that. It's not as kind of like British trad as you would expect in terms of the pedagogy and the curriculum, but the fact that she thought this was a way to increase social mobility and outcomes for the poorest people in New York, and then she just went from like one school to like hundreds of charter schools, all doing this, and just kind of like went to war with the unions and went to war with different people. I found that very interesting. I think sometimes you just need these forceful personalities to make change happen. We've all talked at length about are sort of like changes that we would like to see. And maybe it just needs an Eva Moskovich to go out and bang heads together and get things done. Oh, and Kieran, what are you reading for?
So this week, I've been reading Effects of Working Memory Capacity, Bilingualism, and Language Proficiency on Ambiguous Relative Clause Attachment. And it's a really interesting paper that I think allows us to see some of the parts of being fluent in a language that we almost take for granted. So I'm going to give you guys an example, and I want you to tell me where you would attach the relative clause or the so the friend of the movie star who was sitting on the balcony was under investigation. Who's sitting on the balcony?
The friend of the movie star who was under investigation was sitting on the balcony.
Yeah, that's what I would have gone for. But it almost seems too obvious. It must be a trick. So I'm kind of thinking about it too much.
Oh, is it because the friend of the movie star who was sitting on the balcony was under investigation?
There's no wrong answer. There's no right answer. But what they do is they investigate what the preferences are in people who only speak English, people who speak English and Spanish, and then are there other similar situations in Spanish as well? And so they have this group. So for instance, if it was the movie star who was sitting on the balcony, it's people who would choose that because it's the word the noun that's being processed. Whereas the friend has been processed quite a bit ago in the sentence. And so they're exploring that. I think that's a really good way to demonstrate exactly why this paper is so interesting, because we don't think about stuff like that, but we do it all the time. You know, so if you're going to call anyone a nerd, Adam, I reckon me and Neil have both done ourselves into The focus of this episode, Adam, is going to be the religious education curriculum that you have recently written and released into the world.
Released in a very small way at the moment into the world. It's making its first baby steps outside of my school. So,
can you give us a brief overview of what it is and what you have created?
Yeah. Okay. So it is essentially a fully resourced year 1 to 6 RE curriculum that consists of some of the units are half-termly units, some of the units are termly units, but it's clustered together into termly units. Essentially, I think as I've been on the podcast before, people know I started as a secondary RE teacher, and I was recruited into my current school in part to work on this curriculum project alongside, actually teaching and being class teacher. And it is the fruition of that project. So we sat down in January 2020 to sort of map out the essential kind of columns of knowledge that were going to be in there, and the threads that we're going to pull through, and which religions we were going to feature, and kind of what cultural knowledge we wanted to be in there. And then during COVID, I spent a lot of time planning it, and then I was also I sort of planned a half term, and then I virtually taught all 6-year groups. So I recorded all the videos for all 6-year groups during the first academic year of COVID. Second academic year of COVID, I recorded even more videos, but was also doing class teaching as well. And it meant that I actually got really familiar with this curriculum from a teacher's point of view. I taught all the way from year 1 to 6. It's a year 1 to 6 Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 curriculum. And yeah, so it's basically, in its physical form, it is PowerPoints for years 1 through to 6. The Key Stage 1 PowerPoints are kind of almost like a script for teachers. Sometimes they're like quite a lot of text on the page, because it's almost like doing a class book. Sometimes it's like I say, like a script, so you're sort of talking about certain concepts and ideas in a way that are Key Stage 1 appropriate. Sometimes it's looking at images and things like that and discussing with the class, this is the inside of a mosque, or this is a painting of the nativity, what can we remember about it? And then Key Stage 2 is more the PowerPoints are there to be read with the class, and the PowerPoints are there to prompt questions and knowledge and discussion. And then there are booklets that go with it as well. I think for some reason, people really fixate on the booklets as if the booklets are the main kind of method through which it's taught. But actually, I think that can be the case sometimes if they're really heavy, if a lot of the text and the reading is in the booklet. But these booklets are more to consolidate the knowledge and to offer extended writing opportunities. They're much more a complement to the PowerPoints, and I guess the PowerPoints are a proxy for the teacher standing in the class teaching. Yeah, and so they cover all 6 of the major world religions. Well, you can't see me doing air quotes there if it's on a podcast, which is great. Air quotes, major world religions, air quotes, which is Christianity and Islam, which is like the focus that runs through all of it. Key Stage 1 focuses pretty much solely on Christianity and Islam to really lay those foundations. And then Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhism all get a term, or Buddhism gets a half term. So that's what it is. And it's, like I say, it's making its first tentative steps into the world. So another primary school in our trust has been teaching it this academic year. We've had it embedded for 2 probably full academic years now. And then it's sort of like, I won't say obviously not final form, but it's first draft, first public beta form is going out to a couple more schools. Hopefully maybe more will get on board before September, starting in September. So very exciting times.
Nice. I mean, I reckon that would be immeasurably useful for a lot of people, because if I think about my own upbringing, it was very narrow in terms of the theology that was explored, very much open to other people's opinions, other people's sort of world views. But when I went into the classroom in England, I had a lot of learning to do very, very quickly. And I think had I been able to draw on your expertise, then that would have made learning about Sikhism much easier than it was.
I was going to say, I saw you wince, Adam, when Kieran mentioned the phrase worldviews there. Just a quick jolt of, I was like, is he trolling you on purpose with that phrase?
We can talk about worldviews later, because it's not. I've written a piece for RE Today magazine with a colleague of mine who is quite. The whole point of this piece is that we're quite at polar opposites in terms of the way we look at RE, and it was about this like conference that we went on, this symposium. Again, you can't see me doing air quotes around the word symposium, but there we go. This symposium we went on, and how we actually reconciled ourselves a little bit more. So although I do wince at worldviews, it's not quite such an all-consuming cringe as it perhaps was a while ago. But this definitely is something. In RE, there is this debate about worldviews, and then in the same breath as people say worldviews, people in a very derisive way say, well, we've moved on from the world religions paradigm, and the world religions paradigm is framed entirely in the negative as something that is old-fashioned and bad and, like from the 1950s. And this is an unashamedly world religions paradigm curriculum. It looks at faith using, I don't want to say old-fashioned methods, but methods that I think are still the best way to get students to engage in the world around them without it becoming an intensely like personal, self-reflective. I mean, naturally, any kind of RE is going to be personal, self-reflective, but that's not the purpose of this curriculum. The purpose is like the powerful knowledge, the important knowledge, the relevant knowledge about these religions, and how we kind of, I don't want to say transmit, because that reminds me of like the banking method and Freire and stuff, and I'm still not quite disposed of that kind of philosophy of education stuff that I did in my degree. Transmit's not the right word, but like introduce students to and get them engaged with and get them discussing. I think you said about Sikhism, and that's the thing about being an RE person, is that I don't have any expertise in Sikhism. My degree was in theology. I come from a Catholic Christian background. That's where my expertise lies to some extent. I know a bit more about Islam. The whole point of the reason I'm calling it a sort of beta program is that obviously I've used some research and external sources to create the bits of this that I'm not confident on, and even the bits I am confident on as well, because that's how you write a curriculum. And if there are people out there who are from a Sikh background or have better knowledge and expertise in Sikhism, hopefully the idea is that this isn't just a one-way project of putting it out there and saying, I'm brilliant and this is fantastic and you should use it, but that it will be beta 1, beta 2, and then eventually there'll be a sort of a more polished alpha version of it that will go out in maybe more broadly. Because at the moment it's like I say, it's a public beta, so I'm kind of controlling which schools are using it so that I can keep a lid on things, because there is a gap in the market for it. So there is some demand for it, and I'm a little bit scared that I won't be able to kind of not have control over it. Control's not the right word, but have I don't want it to scale too quickly, because I want to be able to go in and do the CPD myself and offer support myself and things like that. So
what must you have been thinking when it went into the Discord, which you thought was a relatively small sample of teachers, and then all of a sudden every school, south of Birmingham wanted to have it as their RE curriculum?
Well, I mean, the good thing is that I know how hard it is to see something that you really like and then try and get it past your SLT and get the funding for it and do the invoices for it. So it's all very well having like 100 schools say, or 100 deputy heads, or head of curriculum say, oh yeah, this is brilliant, absolutely what I've been looking for, 100% want to get it on board. And that translates into like 3 people who might actually get around to like paying the invoice for it and arranging the CPD dates and actually implementing it. So that is a mercy in a way, is that loads of people are interested in it. I love that. It's fantastic. It's brilliant. I love talking about it. But I'm quite glad that it's a fairly difficult process, because it shows that people actually have to be quite committed to take it on board. And, there is a cost associated with it as well, because the school essentially brought me on for a year and paid me for a year, more or less, to just be an RE nerd, and and it's to repay that investment and to get that investment not in sort of time from schools, to make sure this is something they actually want to take on board and use. I don't think it's not a huge outrageous amount. It's £400, which is at the moment, will get you the curriculum. It's not a per year thing. It's, you pay that and then we get you the curriculum. So
the worldview thing wasn't me trying to troll you. I do remember our conversation about it though, although it was quite a while ago now. But it was one of those situations where my brain took me into a sentence, and I thought, I've got to get out of this sentence without insulting 80% of the people who live in the world. So I'm just going to go with worldview. But I've been thinking about philosophical worldviews as well, because you mentioned paradigms. I've been thinking about the juxtaposition between positivism and interpretivism. So maybe that's why that was on the tip of my tongue. It can't just have been lockdown that prompted you to create this. What was the inspiration and sort of the driving force behind this new curriculum?
Well, I think the driving force behind it is it's almost like the final puzzle piece for my school. So we have a huge curriculum focus. We have been really focused on curriculum for like 5 years now, transformed our history curriculum into these like beautiful knowledge-rich units with these great booklets, transformed our geography curriculum, our science curriculum. Is all really well thought through. It's all really well sequenced. It's all connected. It's beautiful. Our maths and our English as well, it's like in a really good place, basically. Like we're sort of every year now, we just tweak a little bit what we're doing instead of trying to create whole new units or really shift things about, which is amazing, not only from a curriculum point of view, but from a workload point of view as well. And RE was that last sort of missing piece. So I was recruited by an incredible woman called Cassie Buchanan, who is now the CEO of the MAT, but at the time was the head teacher. And she knows me or knew me through Twitter, and she basically saw that I was leaving my secondary job. I had no interest in primary teaching whatsoever, and she was quite persistent in saying like, you'll love it, come and visit the school, etc., etc. And she had this image or this idea in her head that RE was this like last missing piece. It would be good to get someone on board to do that. So I looked at what they were doing in the school. I looked at what they'd done in history and geography, and I looked for briefly at the locally agreed syllabus and the materials they were using already, and I decided that actually it was something I wanted to start from scratch with. Maybe that was like really egotistical, and I was like, this has to be a project that is entirely of my making. But it's really refreshing, terrifying and refreshing to have a blank slate, and you're literally just plumbing in units here, there and everywhere. You're literally just writing a unit and it goes on the board. And so so that's what I did, and it would have got done even if there was no pandemic, because that's what I was there. I think I was working 4 days a week. I was doing cover here and there, but primarily I was to be sitting in the staff room working on this curriculum. And I mean, it's Probably the timescale, it might have been longer, it might have been shorter. But yes, it wasn't a pandemic project. It was a project that happened to take place during the pandemic.
So on that note, and it kind of leads in really nicely to this next question that I have, having been someone who has kind of had similar-esque roles that, brought in, write a curriculum for us, although mine was more as a result of the pandemic, because I couldn't go in and help teachers teach. What were your guiding principles kind of throughout this process of writing this RE-based curriculum?
I made no secret of the fact that I'm writing a book at the moment on primary RE, talking about the curriculum and what I've done at my school and how other schools can kind of like, it's about teaching RE essentially in the primary setting. And I was writing a chapter this week, and it was why should you teach RE? And I kind of built it into like 5. I've broken each of my chapters down into 5 sections to make it a bit more manageable for myself. And it was like, why are you teaching RE? And it was section 1 is you have to. So a guiding principle behind it is there has to be on the national curriculum. It is on the national curriculum almost as a single line to say you have to teach religious education. And that gives us as an academy a lot of freedom. But again, it's that paradox of freedom is actually very constraining, because suddenly you've got infinite choice in terms of what you do. So we had to teach it. You have to teach it. It might as well be high quality. You might as well be doing something useful. You might as well be doing something meaningful. You might as well be doing something that is good, instead of just saying, well, we do our hour, half an hour of RE, and it's kind of, we're a bit ashamed of it, and we do it on a Friday afternoon. The second part of this chapter is that it's interesting. So that was a real guiding principle for me, was that the kids have to be engaged in this stuff. They have to be interested by it. Now, I happen to be such a massive RE nerd that I think almost everything that I could have picked for the curriculum is interesting. So I had to stop thinking like me and start thinking like a year 5 or a year 6 or a year 2 or a year 1, and think what is interesting. Well, stories are interesting. Getting to poke your head around the door of somewhere you've never been is interesting. Getting to see the world through someone else, to understand someone else's motivations in the world, is interesting. Looking at modern questions like climate change and war is interesting. So I thought it's got to be interesting. And then number 3 was it is important. There's an E.D. Hirsch quote about having students be able to basically, they will have a good level of cultural literacy if they're able to understand the front page of the New York Times. And to my mind, RE is a great way of being able to achieve that goal with our students. It provides a lot of hinterland knowledge. It provides a lot of knowledge. I guess I'm kind of previewing what I'm going to say in my 5th point, which is a bit annoying, but that's very important. RE is unlike almost any other subject because it has this massive caveat over it that our students go off to many, many different secondary schools, and there's always a slight chance that they will go off to a secondary school that, for all that it's not as common as it used to be, but it's still fairly common, that will not teach RE again as a discrete subject. So I think about that in terms of takeaways, what we want our students to know at the end of year 6, but what is the important knowledge that they have to really know if they're never going to do RE again, if the last RE lesson of year 6 is the last RE lesson they ever have. Similarly, if they do end up doing RE again, what is the important knowledge that my secondary teacher brain thinks should be embedded? So that was another sort of lens through which I looked at this. Another guiding principle was what is important if either they never do RE again or they have to do RE again. What is important? The fact that it's powerful is something I strongly, strongly believe. So number 4 is that it's powerful. The knowledge that students gain in RE is exactly the kind of knowledge that provides, opens doors for students. So all the kind of things that we think of as indicators of social mobility. So being able to go to art galleries and interpret the art that's on the walls there, being able to pick up literary fiction novels, being able to really enjoy our culture, and I mean all elements of our culture as well, not just what we would cliche kind of call high culture. RE helps with that. So when we're looking at sort of stories from the Old Testament, stories from the life of Muhammad, stories from the life of Buddha, these are all powerful stories that give our students different lenses through which to view the world. Looking at, like, knowing what happens inside a mosque is powerful, because then you can have a conversation with someone who and have something in common with that person, even if they might be from a very different cultural background. And you can also act respectfully now when you go to a mosque or you go to another country that is perhaps predominantly Islamic. Our students have that kind of powerful knowledge. So I think that's another guiding principle, is what is the power of this knowledge? How is it actually going to, our students in our school are, they're lucky to live in very central London, but they're also, some of them are quite profoundly deprived families. How does RE actually help with that? It's not just another bit of kind of useless knowledge. What is the power behind it? And then lastly is that it builds on the whole curriculum. So where does RE fit in? Another guiding principle, I guess. How does it fit into our history curriculum? Luckily, it fits in really well with our English curriculum, because we do all sorts of things. We do like Krishna stories in year 5. So we do Hinduism in year 5. But as I said, it's the hinterland knowledge as well. So Christine Council does this great bit about the SATs paper from years ago, about the dodo, and how you can draw out of that all these different specific domain words, so historical words. You can draw out of it scientific words, you can draw out of it. And a large amount of those words are RE words, like sacrifice, for example. The dodo sacrificed itself. And so our students need to have a whole schema around that word sacrifice by the end of year 6, because it builds up to an idea that will be reintroduced in year 7, 8, and 9. So those are my guiding principles, really. And that's fortunately a little preview of what's coming in the book, because those 5 things are the things that really drive me forwards with RE, is that I really, really believe that this subject actually does all those things. I think if I didn't believe that, I think I'd have to find a different career, really.
Yeah, I don't think that's unfortunate, because not only do I now really want to read your book, but I want to actually go through that. I will find the £400, what you said earlier about all night, well and good, deputy heads, saying, yeah, we want it, but getting it through SLT, I'm now fired up to make sure that I can get it past SLT, or at least not SLT, but those that hold the purse strings, because I actually just want to teach myself that curriculum, because it just sounds incredibly interesting. And having just come back from a short holiday in Cornwall, I can kind of see how, those in children in rural areas kind of really need to see and understand all of these different viewpoints about different world religions, just to really immerse themselves and understand the interconnected world that we all now live in. So given all of that, what was the toughest part of the process?
I think I have 2 answers to this. I think the first one is the Sophie's choice of curriculum choice. And there's a lot said about Key Stage 3 curriculum choice, especially because up until really fairly recently, a lot of schools, including my previous secondary school, shrunk down Key Stage 3 to just 2 years. So they would start teaching in GCSE in year 9. And that led to a lot of teachers having to get rid of essentially an entire year's worth of content and shrink down what they would do, because by the time you get to GCSE, everything is very prescribed, and you teach, even the order in which you teach things is almost set. Whereas at Key Stage 3, you have a lot of freedom about what you do. And so it's really upsetting for teachers. It was really upsetting for me to only have 2 years of Key Stage 3, because there's so much you want to do in so little time. So when I arrived in primary, I thought, with that on my shoulders, that choice was going to be the hardest thing. And then I realized I have 6 years. I have 3 terms and 6 half terms in each year. And actually, it's incredible. The Key Stage 2 is the longest key stage just imaginable. You can't fathom how much time you have from the beginning of year 3 to the end of year 6. It feels almost as intimate that you could do infinite. You could do anything in that time. It's so long. And even Key Stage 1, you got your 2 years to lay your foundations there. And so it was tough spending that time wisely. It was tough not just doing, like the chapter I was writing today was about how every RE curriculum that people write is naturally a reflection of their person and their interests. And mine is no different. There's a lot of art in mine, for example, because I'm really into my art history. I think it's fascinating how we can use art as a lens through which to teach RE and get children to understand RE better. But I had to, you have to knock off the deep end with that and make it just like, the Adam Smith TM trademark RE curriculum. This is basically just my brain dumped out over however many half terms it is. So the narrowing wasn't tough. It was the not going too mad was tough. So I had to sort of constrain myself a little bit with that. And then the second part that I found tough, and again, a reason why I think is a beta and why I think it's not a perfect scheme in any way, shape or form, is the Key Stage 1 stuff, because I've never taught Key Stage 1. As a cover teacher, I've done some virtual school stuff for Key Stage 1, but, I went from teaching year 7 to 13 to year 6 to year 5. I feel comfortable probably going and teaching year 4 and year 3. But Key Stage 1 is not my wheelhouse, and I've had some really good input from our Key Stage 1 team so it's already better than it was, which I'm really happy about. I had some really, really good input from our deputy head, really went through some of the units and looked at the vocab and looked at, making it as really Key Stage 1 friendly. But that was really tough. It's really tough trying to plan Key Stage 1, especially in the middle of a pandemic, when you can't just go and look at it. Now, when I want to plan a year 1 thing or tweak year 1, I just go and stare at year 1 for a while, just stand in the corner of the classroom and be like, okay, this is who we're pitching this out. Go and look at year 2. They might just be doing phonics or art or something, but just like, this is what a 6-year-old looks like. This is what we're doing. You can't do that in the middle of a pandemic. They're imaginary. So not only are you like recording these videos for imagined 5 or 6-year-olds, but you also desperately racking your brains trying to remember what a 5 or 6-year-old looks like. Like, are they already 5'10" by the time they're in year 2? Like, I don't know, because the pandemic does funny things to your brain, and really, I couldn't really recall. So that was tough. That was really tough. Key Stage 1 was really tough. But, the proof is in the pudding. I'll be more interested than anything in going and observing some Key Stage 1 lessons with these materials and getting some feedback from Key Stage 1 teachers. Like I say, they did end up being a bit more of a teacher script, because I didn't want to put it on an actual page as a script. I thought that was a bit too far. I quite like the idea of having a script, but that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. So they're on a PowerPoint, but I'm not expecting year 1 students to like be able to do the kind of reading that year 5s can. So there we go. That's the answer. Key Stage 1, and not going mad on the curriculum stuff, and just making it a reflection of your own interests.
I mean, that's a really sensible approach, because no one's ever going to get anything right first time. And whenever I think about sort of my preferred sequences through mathematics, I'm normally banging on about 50 years. Okay, these guys have been refining this approach for 50 years. That's quality assurance, So for that you're saying, okay, I'm going to release iteration after iteration, taking on board, the Key Stage 1 in particular, because there are some resources that my wife, year 1 teacher, is refining to make them more accessible for Key Stage 1. So she's gone through that thought process as a teacher, whereas you, the person who is driving the curriculum itself and the resources themselves, the fact that you're having that thought, I think is really, really sensible. I can't ask my last question without a little bit more information, because one of the things we've sort of skimmed over is the fact that accompanying these resources will be some professional development, and quite a substantial amount of professional. Do you want to tell us a bit more about what you have offered, almost to reconcile the idea that you're charging other people? And other schools should pay for your work, because you put the effort in, you've made something of really high quality. But I know that that's not an easy balance, because most of us don't get in to education with a business background, or where that's the norm. So yeah, so what professional development have you sort of designed? What can schools look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel horrendous about it at the end of the day, because I know that I don't profit personally from any of this. So the money goes into our school's coffers and gets spent on, bunting for our Jubilee Street Party and things like that. So it's a lot of bunting. So what do I mean, I love doing these Twilight CPD sessions. I've done a few of them now, and I turned up in the pouring rain the other day to a really nice school in Peckham that's taken on our curriculum, and I had I've got my like RE go bag that sits in my classroom for when I go and do CPD. that's got like, I basically just went around the school at some point and stole the top like strata of RE booklets from classrooms. I was like, I'm not going to pick the most beautiful booklets. I'm not going to pick the most, high achieving booklets. We're just going to take the top 20% and we'll just take whatever's there. And so that's my kind of like honest approach to it, is like, this is what it looks like in our school. So these are the kind of outcomes that we've had. Oh, they missed a lesson here. Yeah, of course they did, because, they had sports day. Oh, this piece of writing goes completely off the wall because, yeah, of course it does. This is me presenting a realistic idea. So turn up, hand out all these curriculum materials, hand out an overview of the curriculum, and then just talk about this RE curriculum that I've made, basically a bit like I've done in the podcast. So just go kind of mad on the enthusiasm. And I think a lot of the feedback I've had about these sessions is that because I'm so enthusiastic about it, because it is my sort of like pet project, because I love it so much, it gets a lot of staff on board who might be quite skeptical about working with an outside scheme of work or working with they can see that it's something that kind of has had love put into it and thought put into it. So I go and I talk about the rationale behind it, show off some of the resources, some of the PowerPoints. There's no real set flow to it. It just it's based on people's feedback in the room and questions that they might have. I don't even have a PowerPoint that I use. I just use my sort of like iPad and I write down notes as we go. And so there's that CPD session introducing it, which was one of the reasons I've sort of said that it's restricted to London, really, is because I don't want to be taking loads of time off. I'm a full-time class teacher. I'm really fortunate to have a full day of PPA on a Wednesday. So if I can leave school at kind of like 2:30 to get to another school at 3:30, 4 o'clock. So someone was asking me the other day in Sevenoaks, and I was like, oh, looking at train times, like, yeah, okay, we could stretch to Sevenoaks. It's also quite a London-centric curriculum. I'm really obsessed with the local in RE. So almost every kind of example of a church and a mosque and a Gurdwara is in London. One of the units is specifically looking at Christianity in London. So yeah, that's, if you kind of contact me and you're saying that you're in Falkirk, probably won't be able to get there after work on a Wednesday. Although I guess I could always do virtual CPD. I'm just so like averse to Zoom now, having been through the pandemic. And then like ongoing professional support. So whatever you want that to mean, really. Like, I love talking about this thing. I love going into schools to see it in practice. I love doing coaching on it. I love getting feedback on it. So that's why I want to keep it quite a small project at the moment, because I want to be able to genuinely offer that to people, because it's quite difficult. A lot of people who get lumbered with being the RE lead, I think we talked about this before, that it's seen as a bit of a stepping stone for the, an NQT +1 to do until they can be the English lead, or until they can be a year lead.
I was going to throw an unexpected question your way to see if there's anything that you would be taking away for future instances of curriculum design from listening to Adam.
It would only just be mirroring kind of what Adam said, really. It's like with that carte blanche, like, oh gosh, I can now write a history curriculum. What does that look like? That can look like anything that I want it to, and the kind of the social responsibility that goes with that. Like, am I teaching them the right thing, the wrong thing? And yeah, just kind of like what does this look like at Key Stage 1? Because my unpopular opinion, I don't know if it is unpopular, it might be quite popular actually, is that for Key Stage 1, particularly year 1, like your history, geography, RE, all those kind of humanities could just be done through like, right, kids, like sit on the carpet, I'm now going to read you a story. And it could just all be done through story. And if they're not putting pen to paper, then they're not putting pen to paper. That's absolutely fine. It's just like, if they're coming up to year 3, having a rich bank of, historical stories and, stories about religion and stuff like that, then I think they'd be far better than in a far better position than just, I'm going to try and teach you some RE for 20 minutes and get you to fill out a worksheet in those last kind of 10 minutes because I've overrun. Question I have then, just kind of based on what you said about how much you like to make it about the local, assuming that this school in Falkirk does pay their £400 for it and you are able to do some virtual CPD, how much can they actually edit that final package to kind of like suit that context? And I mean that from a wider theoretical level at the kind of macro planning level to the micro, are these booklets are they in Word format? So if they want to kind of keep your formatting, they can just like change a few things around.
So it's an interesting conversation we've had, because this gets to the real mundane kind of like stuff about sharing a curriculum with other schools. When we've shared other elements of our curriculum, it's been quite locked down and heavily designed. So we've got like a graphic designer who works for our school, who does incredible work on our wellbeing curriculum, for example. We've been selling that and sharing that with other schools, but it's quite a lockdown product because it's in these beautifully designed booklets that we send out. We actually send out the physical copies of them to other schools. There are pros and cons to all these different approaches. There's a pros and cons to sending out as like Word documents and basically letting schools have their complete way to it. And there's also pros and cons to sending out under a bit more of a lockdown format. So I am sending out the booklets as PDFs because I think that I don't know, I think you have to be realistic about it. You don't want it to just be whacked on TES by some like rogue kind of teacher. You don't want it to be perhaps shared in a way that you lose control or ownership over it. Maybe I shouldn't be as worried about that as I am, but it does, I wouldn't want to see kind of mutilated, not that I think people do terrible things to it, but like, it would worry me slightly to just send it out in a totally open format. I don't know. I mean, that gets to kind of like almost an egotism on my part about it. But anyway, there is the deeper thinking behind sending out in that way. So if a school did want to, alter the content, I've got more freedom over the PDF, over the PowerPoints, because you can't really lock those down too far. They are always going to be open to see in that format. And then what I've had other schools do before is use it as a template for creating their own units. So say that they did want to do, take for say it was going out to a school in Newcastle and they wanted to do a unit about Christianity in Newcastle. They can see how I've planned out the unit about London, and they could kind of create their own unit about Newcastle using a similar format. So I think that would be a good compromise. And again, I can support with that. I can provide templates for people. That's what I've done in the past. But yeah, it's a weird thing to do, is to send this out into the world. You're going to lose control over it. You're going to lose, that you have to give up some of your preciousness about it. But also there are things, that's again why I don't want it to go out to hundreds of schools in the first iteration, because I'm proud of it and because I want it to be cared for and loved. And I think if schools are going to pay an amount for it, then hopefully that will encourage them to care for and love it, rather than just kind of not do any training on it, not invest in it, not kind of care for it, which often happens with the locally agreed syllabus resources, because they're just free to schools. They can just have them, and then you end up seeing them used in slightly like underwhelming ways, even though a lot of love and thought might have gone into them originally. Because they're free, schools don't value them, and so schools don't do training on them, and so schools don't have people who are invested in teaching them, which is I guess not really the opinion that I thought I would be having, but it is apparently the opinion I have. So
yeah, that's a really interesting different way to look about it, because I used to be quite happy and quite content with the idea, a school or a person within the school has created something, then they have that freedom to retain it, and if they want to sell it on, despite the fact the taxpayer is technically paying for our salaries, so shouldn't all kind of schools benefit from that, because it's the taxpayer, not the individual school, etc. So shouldn't curriculum resources be given away? But I kind of that's given me something to think about, this idea that if it is just given away for free, then what happens to it? Is it valued? Does it then actually get implemented well in the classroom? So that's certainly given me another perspective to consider such things from.
Yeah, there's definitely a psychological phenomenon about that. Did we discuss that before? I think we possibly might have. But yeah, if you put a small arbitrary price on something as opposed to free, you're going to get more engagement on the where you placed a value on it. And I'll need to really rack my brains to think, who did I have that conversation with?
Was it Chris Such who wrote the blog post about things being free and available? And I guess I disagree with him. And I'm not just saying that because that's the situation I find myself in, but I do think there is something to be said, like you say, for the psychology of we've paid for this, we've invested in it. Because I'm a nerd, I was looking at spelling schemes because we have a scheme that we use. There we go. And there are better schemes out there and there are worse schemes out there. And I was really intrigued by this scheme that Jason Wade has called Sounds and Syllables. And he sells it and it comes as a package and you get CPD with it and stuff like that. And I think if it was free, I'd probably have just butchered bits from it and kind of not really taken on board the whole approach. And I'd have used a bit here and there, and I might have put a booklet together with a couple of photocopies and maybe used it as an extension thing and not really given much thought to it, and kind of not really used it in the proper way because it's a whole considered scheme and it's got loads of, it's not just what I really like about that scheme is that I think there's like 5 different elements to it, 5 different parts of teaching spelling. And I would have just taken some of the PDFs, whack them in a booklet, called it an extension booklet, and tick, I've got something to stretch people, spellers, whatever. But because there's a price on it, I didn't do that. Now it means that I'm not using his resources at all, even though it's quite a good approach to spelling. But then it means that if I was to use his resources, I would get the training and I would get the full package and I would get all the elements, and we would completely shift the way that we teach spelling, and it would be a wholesale kind of reinvention and things would be used in the proper way. So I guess that would be my sort of counterpoint to Chris's blog would be, I do think that having a monetary value, even if it's quite a small monetary value, does create, in the minds of teachers, at least in the minds of SLT maybe, an actual value and a willingness to do things properly as opposed to use things piecemeal. I think White Rose Maths is another example of that. We use a bit of White Rose here and a bit of White Rose there to supplement our maths scheme, and means we're probably not using it to its full potential. And I think if I created some of the White Rose stuff, I'd maybe not particularly feel happy with just the odd bit being shoved in here and there to fill gaps. If I was particularly precious about it, which I am particularly precious about this RE scheme because it's it's my baby. So yeah.
No, it makes a ton of sense. I think, in my head, I'm already thinking, when can I get Adam back to talk about his book writing process? That sounds like one I might have Chris Such involved in too. So we can maybe hash that out as part of that episode and maybe make that like a behind the scenes conversation.
A little debate. Yeah, I know. I'd love to come and talk about writing the book. I think for a year now, I think every time I come on, you say, "How's the book coming?" And I'm always really sheepish and like, I've written some words. I thought of a title, but actually, this half term, I finally got on and sat down and been whacking out. I think I read a piece of advice. I've read a book recently about writing books, which is very meta. They were saying, just get words, just write what's in your head on a page. Do all the footnotes afterwards, do all the research and the anecdotes and whatever, put all that in afterwards, but just get your word count in. And so this half term, I've just been on word count duty, sat doing word count. So doing word count. I think that I might change my my MySpace status to Adam Smith is doing word count. So
yeah, I mean, it was great to see your post about how organized you're being and how you're having the 5 sort of key areas. And the book was about how to write really good nonfiction. I'm definitely going to read that book. Yeah,
do you know, it was really good actually. It was really meta because it's a book about how to effectively write nonfiction that is also a really well written book about it's all about writing for an audience and imagining an audience and thinking about your audience really carefully. And not ironically, whatever the opposite of ironically is, it does really well consider its audience, and it does really think about, it's really personal and meaningful, and there's not a lot of guff in it. Yeah, I have to have a way of breaking it all down, because I think part of being a bit scatterbrained and a bit ADHD is that you need smaller goals. So it's like 10 chapters, 5,000 words a chapter, 5 sections, 1,000 words a section. Do you know what? That's really doable. I can do 1,000 words in like an hour or less sometimes. So that's much more manageable. I just try not to zoom out too far. So if I do 1,000 word section, I just try not to look at the big list of empty sections that still coming. But yeah, I'd love to come and talk about book writing, not because I think I'm any particular expert, but for the exact reason that I'm a complete novice. Suddenly thought, I should write a book, and there's not really, there's lots of education books, but there's no education books about writing an education book, which is perhaps my next project.
Yeah. If John Ketter listening.
Don't hold me to that. Please don't hold me to that.
Someone needs to write that book before I start writing mine, if I ever do write one, because people tell me I should. I don't.
You gotta open your free school first. Free school and then the book about how well the free school went or how badly it went. I'd rather read a book about how badly it went.
I mean, it's going to be called the Neil Almond Free School, or NAF School for short. So it can't,
Exactly.
It's going to have to go terribly badly, but it will have a really good RE curriculum.
Which leads me on to my last question. How can schools get involved? Obviously, you want to control the sample, but what are their options at this point in time?
The options are to contact me. So I don't tend to check my message requests on Twitter. So if you're wanting to contact me, the best way is to email me through my school email, which is adamsmith@charlesdickens.southwark.sch.uk, or if we mutually follow each other on Twitter, then definitely DM me, or if you know me, if you're not in the TDaPE Discord, then you should join the TDaPE Discord, because I do respond to messages on there. My Twitter message requests are a bit, it's one of those things that you open them and you feel instantly guilty about all the unread messages that are in there. All really nice people, but I just don't have the time to necessarily respond to all the queries. So I think, the best way is Discord or email. Get in touch, and then I can send you some sample materials. So we have two schemes of work a year. I want to say year 2 and a year 5 scheme of work, but that might not be right, that are available for you to look at. And there's also a spec sheet that explains some of the rationale behind it, and the cost of it. And then, and then we can invoice you for it, and I can come in and do some CPD. And then actually, it's not quite ready yet. It's one of my summer 2 big jobs is to get it ready for, so the curriculum materials will go out probably in just before the summer holidays to those people who've kind of got it on board. But at the moment we're in less than 10 schools, and I think it'd be nice to, 10, 20 would be a manageable number. Like I say, London is kind of an arbitrary geographical limit I put on London and areas of the southeast that are nice. So I'm not going to go to East Grinstead, sorry. I'm not going to go to Crawley. But I will go to Windsor, and I will go to Rochester, because I like Rochester. So that's a joke, by the way. I mean, it's probably not really a joke, but get in touch, and I'll chat to you on Zoom or in person at the pub, which I've done before, which is nice, or over the phone, which I hate. So can we do it on Zoom?
Yeah, I don't like telephone calls either. People don't understand what I'm saying, so I spend a lot of time going slowly and repeating myself.
I don't know what it is about phone calls that are so horrible. Why? Like, even doing a WhatsApp call is nicer than doing an actual telephone call. I really hate phone calls.
You'll have to let us know when you're in Rochester, because there's that's quite close to where we are.
Yeah, nice, definitely. Well, you could probably see from the end of my road, because I live in Southend. You can see Kent and wave over. On a good day, you can see all the way to Herne Bay and Whitstable and things. So.
Yeah, I mean, I see no reason why 5-10 years from now this won't be the prescribed national curriculum for religious education.
5 years? That's a bit. 2 years, surely. I mean, when are you becoming education minister again? Because you can definitely wangle that. No. I mean, it's a bit like the book. There just isn't something equivalent that fills this gap. So that's what I like about this in a way, is it's not going up against. There's a big Christianity scheme that the Church of England uses. There's other schemes that have totally different pedagogical approaches, and this is it. This is going out there. I probably wouldn't have put it out there at this point if there was another competing scheme, because, as I say, it's a beta. It's not perfect, but it's going out there because I've done a lot of what do they call it, SLE work, where you go out to other schools, and I always end up just having the same conversation, being really enthusiastic about RE, and then they say, and so where can we buy in a scheme? And I'm like, well, wait until mine's ready, and then you can maybe buy in that. And then finally got around to actually doing that. So yeah, I'm trying not to get too many backs up with it, but hopefully there's no one's backs to get up because there's nothing to compete against. So
I hope it goes well. I know it'll go well. And I think if anyone's listening and they are in a mainstream school, local authority school, and obviously you've got certain limitations on what you can and cannot teach. I think even just listening to what your guiding principles and how you've approached this, I think can help develop the quality of RE.
yeah, I think in a local authority school, technically speaking, you have to teach your locally agreed syllabus. You can sit down and cross-reference a locally agreed syllabus with what I offer and then fill in any gaps. You will probably find there's a lot of crossover because locally agreed syllabi tend to be quite vague. But also, as I've said previously, I think on this podcast, there's no local authority syllabus vans that go around to detect whether you are teaching the locally agreed syllabus. Ofsted, frankly, just want to see that you're teaching good quality RE and that it's timetabled. So, you know, legally, maybe I'll get into legal trouble for that because it's a legal thing. You have to teach a locally agreed syllabus if you're a maintained school. But if you're a free school or an academy, you don't have to worry about it. So you can teach whatever you want, including my wonderful scheme. So, yeah.
I guess, I don't know if you're able to see it, I have Kenneth Clark's Civilizations next to me. It was in a charity shop. So I'm just wondering how much of Kenneth Clark's Civilization, either advertently or inadvertently, is in this curriculum.
The year 5 and 6 scheme of work is just that series, Kenneth Clark's Civilization. They start with lesson 1, the Ice Age, and it goes all the way through to Clinging On by the Skin of Our Teeth, the lesson about the episode about World War II. So I'm a massive Kenneth Clark fan. I think he's talks more good stuff. He talks more good stuff. He's a better guy to talk to about the knowledge-rich cultural curriculum than E.D. Hirsch. He's got his head screwed on, does old Kenneth Clark. So there's definite Kenneth Clark running through there. Big influence. I
think between Clark and Jacob Branowski, I think, and the Ascent of Man. I think you've got there a mixture. If there's any reason why the powerful knowledge is so powerful and so important, it's just sit down and watch Civilizations and watch The Ascent of Man, and you'll understand why.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
He's actually the inspiration for my approach to saying less, because obviously when I first started recording this, I would say quite a lot. But watching him and the pauses he takes between words and in the middle of sentences it really helps. My own quality.
You need to get that really plummy accent now that Kenneth Clark has.
I think I get that on 20 years in England, don't I? That's when my accent changes. And
yeah, exactly.
It's goodbye sort of backstory.
Kenneth Clark is actually from Newry, so it took him a while as well to get there.
Oh,
he's not really. It's a joke.
I was going to say it's really close to where I'm from. If you manage to get rid of an Newry accent, anything's possible. It's been wonderful as always, guys. Really appreciate it. All I said to do is say thank you very much for joining me, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
Been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.
Sorry, Adam, we're just kind of talking about what questions can we throw at you last minute without you've actually been prepared.
Oh, it's fine. Lob away, it's fine. Don't worry.